Do you think you're playing football? Do you think you're playing football? Do you think you're playing football? You are showing me nothing.
Fires, Mike Sims, Walker, knocked down.
Oh my God! Davis is going running all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
In trouble, he's going to be sacked. No, gets away. He runs, gets away again, goes to the 40, gets away again.
Jackson takes it himself. Look at him turn back and forth. Oh! He broke his ankles.
I have never seen this before in my life.
Still looking. Firing. Near corner. It's caught!
Denver! Unbelievable!
Welcome to the Fourth Down Fiasco!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourth Down Fiasco, your go-to podcast for all things football. I am your host, the hungover hero, Jordan Pryor, and with me is the rising star of the podcast industry, just Danny, no Tanner today, but it's okay. You're more than just Danny. You are just Ken too, my friend.
Oh,
The rundown of today's pod will go like this. First segment, we're going to recap week 3 of the UFL, go through all the scores, teams, and whatnot. And then for segment 2, we have another fan base fiasco. This one's especially spicy because we brought on a Lions fan, and it's our first international interview. So, with that, we ask you to rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Tell us which one of us you prefer. It's probably going to be Danny. I understand why. He has better hair, so won't even be mad. But we'll definitely take that 5-star review, though. Thank you, friends.
Yeah.
You can also follow us on social media. We're at @4thdown_pod on Twitter and at Fourth Down Fiasco on TikTok and Instagram. So with that, it is fourth down, goal to go. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if I showed up for this game.
Too much partying at work.
Yeah, a little too much. Well, it was the sales team, man. It's
They know what to do.
yeah, you know, they're a different animal, brother. It's
Sales is sales.
yeah. Because here's the thing, you know, normally whenever I go to these conferences, I'm like, I'll be fine to just, you know, have a couple beers, call it a day. Nobody really says anything. Dude, they are so convincing. Like, you just kind of look down and there's always a new drink in your hand whenever salespeople are around. So yeah.
That's why our company makes a lot of money is sales.
Yeah. So, you know, sometimes they got to party from time to time. So I don't blame them.
No.
Anything going on with you, Danny, before we dive into the UFL?
No. Pretty lame.
Yeah, I mean, you did just have a birthday recently.
I did just turn 25 between our last episode and this episode.
Yes, you
Happy
did.
birthday to me.
Happy belated. Actually, you know what? If y'all are going to do the whole leaving us a review thing, tell Danny happy birthday in that review. That would make his day.
Justified.
Justified. Well, you know, what wasn't justified was the ass whooping that the Stallions gave the Showboats over the weekend, 33-14. And
Showboating just a little too much.
yeah, they're worried too much about showboating and not enough about actually playing some damn football. That's what they're doing.
That's true.
Box score real quick or
That's why the Stallions won the USFL last year, is because they were good and they're still good.
Yeah,
however,
they're the best team right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, however, there was a safety at the end of the game. But
Okay.
it was more of a he was at the 1 yard line and kind of got sacked. But it didn't matter anything anyways.
Yeah. But yeah, Adrian Martinez threw up a hell of a stat line, 334 yards, 2 touchdowns, 63% completion. And then also rushed for 44 yards and a touchdown. I mean, my dude was everywhere.
So he just carried the team. He had almost half their rushing yards, all their passing yards, 335 yards. Oh.
Yeah, he was looking good out there. And then Deion Kane.
Deion Kane.
Good. That boy Deion, you know, he was out there, 144 yards on seven receptions. No tutties, unfortunately, but he did have a nice 40-yard little grab. So, you know, looking through these stats, I mean, I didn't particularly watch this game. I did watch my Renegades lose, which we can get
in a heartbreak fashion.
Yeah, we can talk about that here in a minute. But
how Deion Kane isn't a wide receiver 3 or somewhere on any NFL team. There's plenty of NFL teams that could use Deion Kane.
Yeah,
he's just a big boy.
He'll get called up. I think that there's going to be quite a few guys that are going to get called up here in a couple of weeks, especially as we near closer to training camp and stuff.
6'2", 200 pounds.
Kukas, which we talked about, Tanner and I talked about, he didn't have an awful day. 139 yards passing, 68% completion, 1 touchdown, no picks. And then Williams split reps with him and did not look good. 100 yards, 58% completion percentage, and an interception. So
I wonder why they split snaps. I'm curious. I didn't watch the game, but I want to know what happened. Maybe he got hurt. Maybe that's why it's such a blowout. Maybe Kukas got hurt. But they also had no run game. 20 total yards. Their one guy had 14 yards.
Yeah, it was a very lopsided affair.
It looks like they didn't even run the ball. They ran it 12 total times.
Well, I mean, if it's not working, then it's not working. You know, what are you going to do?
That's true. It just looked like a poor game overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So didn't see that one. I did, however, I watched my Arlington Renegades lose in painful fashion.
Just choke it away in the final 2 minutes.
Yeah. Just a brutal ending, losing by 1 point after the week before losing by a field goal. I feel like they're definitely better than that 0-3 record says.
Definitely.
Unfortunately for them, though, winning is winning, losing is losing. Not a whole lot you can do besides that.
You just can't close out games. You guys were up by 10 with 3 minutes left, less than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And you gave up 11 points without even touching the ball.
Pretty brutal. Teamu did all right. 2 tutties, 188 yards. Ooh, that completion percentage is atrocious though. 45.8. Yeah.
11 for 25.
Yeah, that is bad.
He once again carried the run game for them.
Mm-hmm. And then Perez had himself a nice game, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, only a 60% completion percentage. But I mean, he played well.
Still,
Yeah, the offense really hasn't been the issue for the Renegades. They've done a pretty good job of being able to get points on the board. It's just
your defense.
Defense isn't good and can't close out games.
Well, I will say, you guys had 419 total yards.
Mm-hmm.
And did not even you almost doubled their yards, and you guys lost.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like whenever I was watching it felt like Arlington was the better team, but
they had one more drive than you. They had 44 total plays. You had 72 plays.
Jeez.
Yeah. And you guys were in the red zone 4 times and got 3 touchdowns. They were in it 3 times and got 3 touchdowns. But
sorry, what were you going to say?
No, looking at the box score, if you were just to show me this box score, I'd be like, Arlington won.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those weird ones, man. Because I'm even looking at Teamu didn't really do all that great. And I'm looking at, thinking to myself, well, there wasn't a ton of yards through the air, so there had to have been a bunch of yards on the ground. And no, Teamu was also their leading rusher with 53 yards. Harris, who was averaging 3 yards a carry and only had 27 total. It's just a weird box score, man.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate because, with the Renegades winning it all in the XFL last year, I feel like what would you call them? Some very unfair expectations have been placed upon them. And I think that people also kind of forget that they had a losing record going into the playoffs last year. So there's still hope. There's still hope.
They should not have won the championship last year.
Correct. They played
hot. They got hot at the right time.
Hey, sometimes that's all it takes. Winning.
Maybe
is winning.
They're just resting all their good players until the playoffs.
There we go. Maybe that's what it is.
On breaking news out of the NFL. Former Ravens running back J.K. Dobbins is signing a 1-year contract with the Chargers to replace Eckler.
Interesting.
If Dobbins can stay healthy, he's good, but he just has been injury prone his entire career out of college.
Yeah, poor guy.
I know, seriously.
He can never finish a season, which I just feel so bad for because he is talented.
Yeah. But heading to there's no other Houston, Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan Panthers, Houston Roughnecks.
Yeah, I was going to try to transition from LA to St. Louis. Let's go back to St. Louis. The Battlehawks take on the Brahmas and beat them 31-24.
The Brahmas or the Brahmas?
Brahmas. I said Brahmas.
Yeah.
Brahmas.
Hey, it's okay. I was telling Tanner last week that every time I see it, I always think it says Bahamas.
Bahamas.
Yeah.
The Battle Chickens versus the Bahamas.
The Battle Chickens versus the Bahamas.
Their Twitter account actually called them the Battle Chickens. They said, getting ready for our game against the Battle Chickens. And then they lost.
Yeah.
I think it's because their kicker broke his neck. Poor dude.
Wait, he what?
He fractured his neck. Remember the kicker that lit up the dude in week 2? It was like the social media star.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ended up like fracturing his neck.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, going through this box score, AJ McCarron, 152 yards, 70% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no picks. Just a good, clean game from him. Sailors was out there doing his damn thing, rushing 62 yards rushing on 7 attempts, 8.9 yards per attempt, including a long 25 one that he broke off.
And a tutty.
Yeah, and a tutty. And then McCarron also had a couple of rushing yards and a rushing touchdown as well. Super efficient performance, it looks like.
Yeah.
Just by Hakeem Butler had a nice little game. What is that? 87 yards on 6 receptions, 1 touchdown. Had a 33-yard bomb. Looks pretty good on their end. I think that the Battlehawks they're good. They're definitely
they're one of the teams to beat. However, their defense did not get to the quarterback at all. 0 sacks.
I feel like was it week 1 that they also had no sacks?
They're not getting pressure. They had 0 sacks, 0 picks, and only 4 tackle for losses.
Yeah, I think I think that their big issue kind of moving forward is definitely going to be that defense, especially whenever you're going up against like the Birmingham Stallions. They're going to have to figure out how to do better on the defensive end because their offense puts up points. AJ McCarron's been looking like an NFL player playing in the UFL, which
should be in the NFL.
Yeah, imagine that. He'll be a backup somewhere next year for sure.
Yeah, later in the season. I think he likes just starting. He'll get paid just to sit behind someone after the season ends.
Yeah, but that to me sounds like a great gig.
No, yeah.
Run me that. And then
seriously.
Looking at the Brahmas.
Not Brahmas.
The barometers.
Yes.
Garbers had 143 yards through the air, 1 tutty, no picks, of course, because, Battlehawks defense they're definitely not ball hawks. I can tell you that much.
No, yeah.
It looks like it pretty evenly distributed. Had 2 receivers, one with 58 yards, one with 52, 24.
Latimer had a good game or a solid game. Not good, but 3 sacks or 2 sacks. But this kind of the box score kind of looks like the Renegades one again. Mm-hmm. San Antonio destroyed the whole box score.
Yeah.
Better time of possession, barely total yards, a lot more plays. They got in the red zone 5 times, only scored 3 though. It's like the St. Louis only got in the red zone twice.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And they were able to capitalize the way that they did.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I have been enjoying watching some of these UFL games because it's just a very different style of football.
Yeah.
It's very, it feels very much like backyard football almost, but on like a greater stage of, you know, it's sometimes it can be really ugly and, but you know, it's guys who you can tell that they're incredible athletes and that they're good at what they do. But yeah, it's a lot of times a lot of very ugly games, but they're fun because they're all you know, they just get into the muck, into the weeds and stuff. So
it's like watching college football.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Of you know, there are definitely better teams and better players and whatnot, but it's fun though.
Yeah, every once in a while we'll have a crappy NFL game though, which is kind of entertaining to watch. Where you're like, how is he still on this team? Like, how did he even get allowed out of the locker room? Nathan Peterman's 4 picks in the first half, for example. But St. Louis even had a turnover. So, like, the Brahmas might have lost, but they're still a solid team. I just don't think they played well.
No, they didn't.
I wish I would have watched it to see what went wrong.
And then, well, I can tell you, you're asking about what's going wrong. Well, I'll tell you someone whose season looks like it's going wrong, and that's the Roughnecks, who lost to the Panthers 34-20 in an affair that very clearly Michigan was the better team. I did catch a little bit of this one too because I'm a Houston hater till I die. So
Hater.
With the exception of except for the Texans, but only because of CJ Stroud.
Yeah, true.
But anytime I can hate on the city of Houston, I will gladly. But yeah, I think that Houston, the Roughnecks, are the worst team in the UFL. I know that Renegades and them are tied for the 0-3 record. I mean, we'll see next week because they play each other. But yeah, Houston just looks very overwhelmed with every team that they face. I don't think that they've had a single close game this season.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was close at halftime. And then
the third quarter happened.
22 points in the third quarter.
Yeah.
They had a blocked punt. Oof.
And then what is that? Sinnott had 197 yards, or Sinnott, excuse me, had 197 yards, touchdown, interception. They really didn't get the running game going. I mean, dear God, Pledger the fourth, bro.
He is grinding.
14 carries and only 34 yards and a 2.4 yards per carry average. That
at some point, that's the O-line.
Atrocious. That is atrocious. And then it looks like, I mean, the wide receivers, at least, it was kind of well distributed of touches, receptions, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, defense did not look good out there.
No.
Doesn't look like they forced any type of turnovers. So that's fun.
Yeah. But week one with Roughnecks, they lost by 6 to the Showboats, 18-12. Then they lost then they lost 23-18 to the Defenders, and then they lost 34-20.
I thought that Defenders game was from last week. I thought that they had lost by more than that. Weird.
Probably just felt like it.
Probably. Perry had a solid game for the Panthers. 208 yards, touchdown, no interception, 84% completion percentage. So, I mean, surgical. Also had
10 yards, almost 11 yards per pass.
Yeah. And then was also doing his damn thing on the ground too, with 9 rushing attempts for 60 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns as well. And then Colburn did not look very good. A lot of short things, but hey, he got himself a tud. So, that's more than I've gotten in the UFL. I'll tell you that much.
He had 28 total yards, and 14 of those came off of 1 rush.
Fair enough.
What is it with the quarterbacks being leading rushers? That's like half of them this week.
Yeah, actually, I think that's all the teams are, all of them except for one of the games.
AJ McCarron did not lead his team in rushing. I can tell you that.
Actually, I think Didn't we just look that up? He did.
He had a couple yards. He didn't lead the team, though.
Oh, okay.
But
he had the rushing touchdown, though.
No, he had a touchdown. Yeah. Sims, though, 4 receptions, 84 yards, and a tutty, long as 66. He caught all of his targets.
Mm-hmm. He looked
had
good.
5 of 48. Yeah.
And then their defense obviously looked good. Kai Nakua with an interception. Is he related to Puka by chance? Do we know?
Probably.
And then, but yeah, the one interception, they had 7 tackles for loss. Trying to see where
he went to BYU. Puka Nakua went to BYU. I'm Googling.
We might have to, let me see real quick. And
he is Kai Nakua.
Oh, yep. Older brother.
Wow.
Yeah. Good for you, dude. Hopefully you can make it into the league and get an NFL paycheck.
His Panthers picture kind of looks like a little off-brand Puka.
Well, yeah, that's why, like, I, obviously the name, but then I just saw his face and I was like, yeah, y'all look like y'all could be like cousins or something, but that's an older brother. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That is our recap of the UFL week 3. Obviously, as the season continues to progress, we're going to continue to give y'all updates. But we are going to go kick it over to our off-season segment.
Well, we have one thing left. If you're in the northern Colorado area.
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about that real quick, Danny, before we kick it to commercial?
On the first round of the draft, Thursday the 25th, we will be hosting our first live podcast recording.
Ooh.
So if you're in northern Colorado, if you come to the Loveland Buffalo Wild Wings for the first round, you can be on our podcast. Talk about your team. Talk trash about what draft pick you have.
Yeah.
Or the other teams, either one.
Bro, come talk your shit. Hey, we are super friendly folks. We'll be excited to see you. We're gonna have signs so you can't miss us.
Yep.
But yeah, come talk your shit if you in the northern Colorado area. We want to hear it all day.
We need to see you there.
Yes.
And you get a 0% discount by saying our name at Buffalo Wild Wings.
They do not give a shit. We asked for permission and they said yes, and they told us we can't even have our logo out, which we will probably still have our logo out.
Yep, we're still gonna have our logo out. My bad.
Yeah, whoopsies. Cool. Yeah. Let's kick it over to commercial break, and then afterwards we will talk to our Lions correspondent, our first international interview right after this.
Peace.
Picture this. You're the proud owner of a business, and you've got it all. The hustle, the bustle, and the occasional office kitchen mishap that turns into an alarm-triggering emergency.
Whoa!
But fear not. Western States Fire Protection is here to turn your workplace into a disaster-free zone. Our in-house team handles everything from fire sprinklers to alarms and monitoring, inspections, extinguishers, and more.
Whew. Crisis averted. Thanks, Western States Fire Protection.
No problem. We've been protecting lives and property since 1985, and we take our job seriously, even when your employees don't.
Oh no, not again.
Visit WSFP.com to request a quote. Because when your microwave thinks it's a flamethrower, we're the heroes you need.
Are you looking for a podcast to advertise your business? Well, you're in luck. Here at the Fourth Down Fiasco, we're looking for show sponsors. Whether you want to be a platinum sponsor and be mentioned at the beginning and end of every episode, or you just want a simple 30 or 60-second ad, we got you covered. If you're interested in having a spot on our show, you can reach us at fourthdownfiasco@gmail.com. That's fourthdownfiasco@gmail.com. We are excited to hear from you and even more excited to have you on the show. Join the Fiasco family now.
They tell the truth, how you settle in. Your team's veterans, so how you cope where you sit this season. Better spin, better rhetoric, but tell us greatest teams have been. I ask the question of you now to see the thoughts you spin. FANBASE Fiasco, don't think that I'm irrational. My team better than your team, and that's just facts, bro. We've been examples. Don't think this year don't mean much. This legacy you talking about, let me tell you about my team, son.
All right, we are back with the FANBASE Fiasco. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like that song, that is from friend of the pod, Cam Hayden. You can download his music on Apple Music and Spotify. You can also download his book and buy it off of Amazon called Working on the Process. So with that, we have a really exciting interview, our first international interview, that is. And so we've got the One Pride Maniac. Luke, what can you tell us about you that we can give you nicknames for and maybe tease you later on in the pod?
Those are good ones. I mean, yeah, I go by One Pride Guy on Twitter just because I think it was the only handle on Lions Twitter that wasn't taken at the time of my account being made. Real name's Luke. You guys can call me Luke. Luke, One Pride Guy, suffering Lions fan, long-suffering Lions fan, anything of the above that has to do with my franchise's demise over the years. But as we start to turn the corner, hopefully One Pride Guy isn't a name that's slandered too much going forward.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I think just being a Detroit Lions fan, you might have to experience a little slander. I'm sure you've had plenty of that in your lifetime. So
fair share growing up and even these past couple of years. But that's part of being a Lions fan. And it's been one of my favorite parts, actually, is seeing how you sort of navigate that.
Yeah. Well, so let's just dive into the hard-hitting shit first, shall we? What are the odds that y'all do go 0-16 next year?
The 0-16 odds, I'm going to say, are as least alive this coming season as they have been my entire life. So I was there for the 0-16 season. I was a little bit young at the time, but seeing it firsthand was something that I'll definitely never forget. As far as next season, I would wager we don't go 0-16. I think this Lions team is probably the closest we are to the opposite of that, of seeing a 16-0 season. I don't know if that's jumping the gun, but I don't think 0-16 is on the table anytime soon, thankfully.
Thankfully. Now, you know, if as long as Dan Campbell stays, though, but you know, once he starts getting all the money, you know,
depends how many fourth downs we decide to go for when the game's on the line. That'll really determine whether or not we're going 0-16.
He sticks around.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked about that actually after that game of just it was really unfortunate to see it as it was unfolding, because it was like every fourth down y'all went for, we agreed that we wouldn't have, and every fourth down y'all didn't go for, we would have gone for. And so, you know, hindsight's 2020. I mean, he is a professional, whereas we're just here speculating. So obviously things get a little bit dicey whenever you're actually in the mix. But so, Tanner, I still haven't gotten those questions that you were going to forward over. Yeah,
I sent you the email. But
okay. I'll keep an eye on it, but you can go ahead and ask the first one then.
All right, sounds good. So how did you end up becoming a fan of the Lions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm actually born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for our American viewers who might not know where Toronto is. Hopefully everyone knows where Toronto is, but if not, just...
Have you seen the American education system?
That's a good point. So sometimes you just got to clarify. It's Toronto, Ontario, Canada, just north of you guys. But so yeah, born and raised from there. And a lot of people would say, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to pick the Lions, especially if you're a fan from international area. Picking the Lions is like the last team that you would pick, I would assume. So it doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface, but my family, my dad was actually born in Windsor, Ontario, which is the city just, I guess, just north of Detroit, technically south if you want to look at it from a different angle, but close enough to Detroit that when he was growing up, that was the team, right? The Lions, Red Wings, Pistons, Tigers, those were the teams to cheer for. So he's always been a lifelong Detroit Lions fan. So it was something I was just sort of born into with no real choice. The running joke in the family was, and it was something I heard a lot growing up, was either you're a Lions fan or you find another roof to live under. So that's sort of how I got into the franchise. And then next thing I know, I'm rooting for the team, and it's been going on probably 20 years now that I've been following the team.
I mean, I do understand the not really getting much of a choice in your fandom. As does Tanner, being a Steelers fan. You know, whenever you're a part of those historic franchises, it's not a matter of who, it's a matter of when you become a fan.
Right. That's right.
Because it will follow you until the day you die.
We're the real fans, guys. We don't get to pick, right? And we're still here, and we're not jumping from bandwagon to bandwagon. I can say that's something I'm at least very proud of, is that I see Lions fans popping up now after these last couple of seasons, and I'm thinking they don't know the half of what we've been through with this franchise. So it's good to see.
They didn't have to watch the mid-2000s Lions play. Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff.
Or having their heart ripped out whenever their quarterback, generational quarterback, whatever, leaves and then immediately wins a Super Bowl the year after.
I'm sure we'll get into that. That's caused some restless nights in my household for sure.
I'm sure. Tanner, I did finally get the questions. They just randomly popped. Yeah, they randomly popped up. So, but you're more than welcome to continue since I stepped on your toes.
Before we go in there, though, I am curious. When the Browns ended up going 0-16, did that help alleviate some of the kind of stigma of the 2008 season? Like, did you feel a little bit better, or was it not really much called state? Yeah,
that was like the best day of my life. Are you kidding me? It was amazing. I remember vividly watching the game with my dad, who's a lifer as well, and we were just like holding on to each other, just being like, this might, like, the jokes might maybe end, or if they don't end, they might be alleviated in some sense. And when I remember it vividly, I think it was a dropped fourth down pass. I couldn't tell you who dropped it, but it was in the Browns receiver's hand. And if he catches it, they're in field goal range. They're 1-7 or 1-15, and I was like, the hand of God had smacked it out of his hand. It was incredible.
I remember.
Yeah.
So it was Corey Coleman, and the only reason I know that is because it was against the Steelers, and we had all of our backups in because I think we already like clinched our spot.
Yep.
And we were sitting there, and I remember my dad and I were like kind of opposite end, where we were like, we're pretty pissed off because it's like, okay, we can't be like the Browns only win this season, right? Like, if they're going to go 0-16. And I think Corey Coleman was not a first overall. He's a first round pick. I think he was like 22 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was like his first or second year. And it's like, oh, here's this stud receiver that they drafted, and just wide open, just completely whiffs that catch. And it's really petty to say, but it is one of my favorite times watching a Steelers game, was just watching this just absolute destruction of another team.
Oh yeah. Fourth down, wide open in the flats. I can't remember who the quarterback was. I don't know if it was Baker at the time. Was it Baker?
No, it was Deshaun. It was Deshaun Kaiser.
Deshaun Kaiser puts it right in his lap. Perfect throw to the flat. Coverage wasn't there, and just dropped it. And I knew right then. I made sure the timeouts were gone. I said, it's not the Lions anymore. At least not just the Lions.
Not alone,
anymore.
Right?
Not alone there. So, always good to remember that and good to see that. Poor Browns.
Yeah, well, maybe not. But going into some other happy memories, who was your favorite player to watch through your lifetime?
That's a great one. I think, just showing my age a bit, I have to say Calvin Johnson, hands down, probably.
Oh, Megatron? Hell
Megatron. Yeah. I mean, just when I had started growing up watching, he was starting to become, reach that elite level. I know he was drafted in 2007, but there was no one like him in the league at that time, right? There was, of course, you have receivers that could go up and get jump balls and had the athleticism, but there was no one that kind of had that total package of route running, catching, spectacular catching, going up to get the ball. So humble. I remember watching his tape when he was at Georgia Tech on the Yellow Jackets, just like an absolute machine on the field, but the nicest guy you could meet. You see him in interviews, never a bad word to say about his teammates. And that's tough when you're playing on, like you guys said, the late 2000s Detroit Lions. I'm surprised he didn't burn out. And when everyone says that he retired too early in 2015, I just say, you try and play 8 years with that Lions team and tell me you don't either want to find a different team or hang up the cleats, right? So definitely Calvin Johnson. Yeah, had a chance to see him multiple times live. Just spectacular in person. It's unlike anything I've seen from any athlete.
Was he on the 0-16 team?
No, yes, he was actually. Yeah, drafted in 2007. So his second year was the 0-16 team. And then in a stroke of good fortune, if you want to call it that, 2009 is when we took Stafford first overall.
You guys got Stafford,
yeah, exactly.
I remember 2011, whenever we played y'all, I went to that game at AT&T Stadium, and dude, Megatron. So we were whooping that ass at halftime, and Cowboys fans are feeling good, and we're like, oh yeah, this is easy dub. It's Detroit, and then second half, all of a sudden, Calvin Johnson decides, no, I'm gonna put the entire team on my back. Scores 2 touchdowns. I think he went for like, what was it? I had it pulled up here just a second ago. 8 receptions, 96 yards, and I'm pretty sure all of it came in the second half. 2 touchdowns, and I mean, he was just unstoppable. And that was my first time seeing Calvin Johnson play in person, and I immediately became a fan of him just as a player. I mean, it sucked that we lost to y'all that game, 34-30, but ever since then, I was like, okay, this dude's the truth, because he like single-handedly brought y'all back into that game. And was stiff-arming people and jumping over people, and just his sheer athletic ability is just disgusting. So I think that's a great choice.
Yeah, he was a menace, and not to rub salt in the wound or anything, but I actually had jotted down 2 years following 2013. I had to put it down as my favorite Calvin game of all time. Of course, it's known as the Matthew Stafford fake spike game. Also, I think was it at AT&T? Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, it was.
One of the best games I've ever seen. Complete shootout. Des Bryant was going off. Des Bryant was mossing guys in the corner of the end zone on fade routes. Tony Romo was carving us up. I think that game's Calvin finished with something like 329 yards.
Yep, 14 receptions, 329 yards. Dude, that is a quarterback stat line. Jesus
right?
Christ.
Is that still the record? I think because he had the record for most receiving yards in the game, right?
He did. I'm not sure if it's been broken yet by anyone, but it was one of those games where he caught like a 85-yard slant pass and almost took it the distance. He had that clutch catch right at the end to set up the fake spike. And I remember like watching that game and just thinking like, this guy is the truth. Like you said, there's no one been like him up to this point. I don't think so. I got to give my props to Megatron.
There has never been a receiver since him who can truly, to the degree that he can, just take over a game and just be just such a monster out there. I mean, just a god amongst men, really, is what he used to look like. So,
okay, so it was the second most receiving yards in the game. The first most came in 1989 by Flipper Anderson.
Shut up, Flipper Anderson.
Yeah,
give him his flowers.
All right, so we'll get into the next question. Looking back at the last season, how would you grade the season on a scale of A to F?
I think this last season, especially for the Lions, is a textbook A. I would say it was our second time with 12 wins, I think, in franchise history. We're usually lucky to scratch 10 and make wild card, right? So first of all, to win to the division, it was our first time winning the NFC North ever, I believe. The last time we had won the division was it was called the NFC Central.
Yeah.
with the Tampa Bay Bucks in it for some reason. That was a little bit before my time, but I do remember never winning the NFC North. Of course, my time watching was spent with Packers and Bears and even Vikings to some extent, dominance in the North. So to not only win the division, wrap up 12 wins, ton of great games, ton of great player development. If you even want to forget wins and losses, just seeing the team progress from what Brad Holmes was able to draft in the offseason was great to see. Wrapped it up with a great home win, wild card playoff win, first time since 1991 season. Was incredible. Again, I was there live to watch that, and it was probably the best moment that I've seen live in sports for a Lions fan. And then to pull up the upset against the Bucks at home as well. Put us one game out of the Super Bowl. I think anytime you get one game, not even one game, you get 30 minutes, as I'm sure we'll discuss later, to my chagrin, outside of being a Super Bowl team. That's going to be a textbook A season for me.
I mean, I fully agree with the grade. You know, I might even give you all an A+, honestly. So I figure that your favorite moment of the season is probably winning the divisional game and making it to the championship game. What was the worst moment? I think I know what it is, but just for the sake of conversation.
Yeah, you're definitely right about the best moment. I mean, beating the Bucks was surreal, but I would almost say the Rams game was more surreal, maybe just because it was the first one and because it was Stafford, and because I was there live. That makes it like top of the list for me. Worst moment, I actually have I have a few jotted down here because as good as it gets for the Lions, there's always something that's dragging you down the other way. Number one is going to be Decker reported in the Cowboy game prime time. So that game goes right down to the wire. Once again, great game against the Cowboys. Games never fail to disappoint.
They're always exciting.
We have a CeeDee Lamb 97-yard, 95+ yard touchdown on a whiffed, what should have been a safety, completely whiffed. Turns out to a 95-yard touchdown the other way. Great shootout back and forth. To drive down, right, to get in the red zone, to score, to take the lead with 20 seconds left. End of the game, like last drive of the game. To decide, okay, we're going for it. To call up an eligible lineman pass play, to convert an eligible lineman pass play. Here we
go.
To have it flagged back for ineligible receiver downfield, ineligible man reporting. It was one of those games that had I not been a Lions fan staring at the TV all those years before, seeing horrible calls, probably would have had me with a fist through the TV. But like you said, when you're a Lions fan, you're kind of conditioned to pain. So I would say that was the worst season, or the worst moment of the season for me. I don't know how you guys feel about that game, but
I do want to just mention the tripping penalty that we got hit with when y'all tripped us. So yeah, it was a poorly officiated game all around.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk
exactly.
About that.
Yeah, poorly officiated game all around. But there's no hard feelings because that game honestly took years off of both of our lives. If we're being absolutely honest about it.
Yeah, and tough in retrospect because I think if we get the W in that game, we don't have to play a wild card game, right? So I think that would have moved us to first in the NFC. You're looking at, you beat, I don't know who it would have been if it would have even been the Bucs anymore, but you beat one team and you're into the conference, right? Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't have to worry about wild cards. So that was tough. The Kendall Vildor face mask bounce in the game against the Niners was tough. We went out and laid a goose egg against the Ravens was tough. They completely kicked our ass that entire game. So a few ups and downs in the season, but for a Lions season, I've seen much worse.
Fair enough.
So we're going to obviously kind of going through each of the teams. We got to talk about coach, QB. So we'll start with coach first, but what was your first reaction when you guys signed Dan Campbell a couple years back?
Yeah, I was iffy at first. I hadn't heard much about him. I remember him briefly playing for us as tight end, and I remember his time coaching for the Saints and Dolphins a bit as sort of like an athletic coach, tight ends coach. But whenever you get news of a coach coming in with no head coach experience, it's always cause for concern. It took me the first episode of Hard Knocks to just fall in love with the guy. The first bit of raw character. Okay, I don't care if you have one ass cheek and three toes, we'll kick your ass. I don't care. We're going to bring him to the deep waters and drown him. Like, the quotes are endless. And at first you think, okay, maybe he's all talk. Maybe he's a little too rah. But I grew up idolizing coaches that were like that, the Rex Ryans, the Jim Harbaughs. I like coaches with personality, and I think it's something that our team needed at a time when we were looking to sort of get over that hump. I mean, we're coming off a very disappointing season. So to see someone that was going to re-energize the locker room, it was something I was definitely interested in, and just glad he's sort of built a roster around him with defensive and offensive coordinators that help get the job done on the field. So it's not just all talk.
Oh, yeah, no, I think he's an excellent coach. I remember whenever the Cowboys were moving on from Jason Garrett, his name popped up. We ended up obviously not going with him and going with McCarthy instead. And then the year afterwards, he signs with y'all. But I wanted him so bad because, he's a Texas boy, and I like the rah kind of stuff. And, as much as I give guys like Nick Sirianni shit for being super rah at the end of the day, I'd be happy with a coach that would be like that instead of a coach that coddles his players, Mike McCarthy. So, I think that what he brings to the table, I mean, guys will run through a brick wall for that man. And there's a lot of power in that as a coach to know that every given Sunday, your guys are going to give 110% because they respect you and they love you so much that, effort is never out of the question whenever it comes to the Dan Campbell led Lions, regardless if y'all win or not, y'all lay it out there.
Well, I'll sacrifice talent at some positions for guys that want to play for a coach like that. So it's that effort that you can't replace. And we have guys now taking pay cuts to stay because they love playing for Dan Campbell so much. We have free agents joining the team that are taking, pay cuts from their team that want to be on a winning team and want to play with Dan Campbell. So that's something you don't get with, some other coaches in the league, where you can be a brilliant mastermind between the lines, but if you lose the locker room, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
I mean, and a great example of that is looking at, the Patriots the last couple of years,
100%.
I mean,
100%.
When you're not winning, you can't be a hard ass, it's not going to work. And I mean, that's a big reason, Mike Tomlin, for whatever reason, is polarizing for Steelers fans. Anyone who's anti Mike Tomlin, I just don't think has left the rock that they're hiding under, So, and Dan Campbell is that way where, he's a player coach and people are going to always want to flock to that coach. They're going to take the discounts. They're going to want to stick around and they're going to feel like they have a chance because they trust the guy who's leading them. It's why Doc Rivers is a terrible coach in the NBA, right? Nobody believes in Doc Rivers, but everybody believes in, Spoelstra, so that's why the Heat always do well. So and it's the same thing with the NFL. As long as Dan Campbell keeps the locker room, I mean, people are always going to keep playing for him, and you're going to get the best out of the team you have around him.
Yeah, for sure.
The next one I have is about Amon-Ra. So where would you personally have Amon-Ra rank among current wide receivers in the NFL?
I had thought about this for a long time, especially during the off season, and especially with the news breaking of the Netflix series coming out, Receiver, where they decided to give him a shot in that as well. Is it crazy for me to say top 5 in the league? Is that unreasonable? There's a couple guys I would take over him for sure. Looking at Justin Jefferson with the Vikings, CeeDee Lamb on the Cowboys, Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, Jamar Chase with the Bengals. Barring that, I think it's a toss-up between him and A.J. Brown with the Eagles for 5th. I mean, you look at a guy who's on a team that's run heavy. Gibbs and Montgomery are the basis of our team. Our offensive line is the basis of our team. And yet he goes out there with Jared Goff, who's not a gunslinger by any means. Great pocket passer, but definitely not a gunslinging quarterback. 3rd in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, 4th in touchdowns for a team that runs primarily in the red zone. And face of the team. I mean, when you think Lions last season, apart from maybe Hutchinson and Goff, you're thinking Amon-Ra. So I think he brings something to the team that, that star wide receiver should bring to your team. So for me, I think he's a top 5 receiver in the league. If not top 5, I don't think you get past putting him outside of the top 6 or 7. I'd like to hear what you guys think about that.
I would say 6. I think the one person you left off that list was Stephon Diggs. And I especially, with him being he will be the focal point of that nasty Houston offense next season. But yeah, after you started going through it, I was like, okay, yeah, besides, maybe tossing in Diggs, yeah, I'd probably give Amon-Ra 6.
He's definitely hard to pinpoint. Yeah.
Well, statistically, Amon-Ra was top 5 last year. I mean, he was tied for 2nd in receptions, 3rd for receiving yards, and it looks like he was either 3rd or 4th in touchdowns. So
okay.
Statistically, he was top 5, and I can see the Diggs argument, but I think Diggs hasn't had a great last 2 years or so. So I think
yeah, absolutely. I totally feel that. And I think, yeah, you look Diggs 2 years ago and you're thinking top 2 or 3, he was up there when him and Josh Allen were clicking. You see how he's sort of fallen off and now he's even out of Buffalo. Right. So it takes something away when you look at, even if it's a move for his benefit, that if he's not able to stick around and produce, maybe he needs that change of scenery to get back into that top 5 conversation. But yeah,
I think for top 5 receiver, it's kind of hard right now because one, yes, he was like 3rd best receiver last year, but also Justin Jefferson was injured pretty much the entire year. Jamar Chase missed some time.
And also had his starting quarterback out for the entire season, basically.
Yeah, had a starting quarterback out. And then, I mean, you saw how good DJ Moore was in a new environment. So, I mean, you can make an argument for him because that was only his first year in a new system. You can make an argument for either Cooper Kupp or Puka, depending on who you prefer. I mean, A.J. Brown, you mentioned. Devontae Adams is still in his probably arguably still in his prime. I mean, that's the issue with the league right now, is the wide receiver talent is so inflated that, yeah, Amon-Ra probably 5 or 6 years ago, definitive top 5 talent, but there's about 10 top 5 talent wide receivers in the NFL right now, which makes it pretty difficult.
All right, so with that, I know that we were talking about Amon-Ra, but do you feel that Jahmyr Gibbs was underutilized in 2023? And if so, how would you like to see him utilized more this upcoming season?
Yeah, Gibbs is an interesting one because if you go back and see when we drafted him, a lot of people said it was a reach. I mean, he was our pick really early on, and a lot of people were saying, I mean, even a lot of NFL execs were saying you don't go that far down for a running back, especially when your team had a lot of other needs that they needed to address. But the reason, if you look at Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell talk about why they picked him, they say, Gibbs is a weapon, and you can kind of use him anywhere on the field. He can line up as a running back in the backfield. He can line up as sort of a scat back that's running routes. We've seen him line up in a receiver in a 5 wide set for, screen passes and things like that. So I think, yes, Gibbs was underutilized in the sense that he was not a primary back. So if you look at Gibbs' numbers from last season and you're a team like, say, the Atlanta Falcons with Bijan Robinson, you would not want his numbers to look like Gibbs' numbers if he's your solo running back, right?
Right.
But when you take into account that Gibbs was splitting reps with Montgomery, Gibbs was not getting first team snaps till probably about week 6 of the season, where we were solely relying on Montgomery. I think he was utilized in exactly the way that he should have been for our offense. So he's not a 3-down back. He's not someone you're handing the ball off to 1, 2, 3 to try and pick up first downs. He's a guy you're going to use sparingly, screen passes, swings, sweep run patterns. We run a lot of stuff between the tackles with Montgomery to pick up those, nitty gritty yards. So it's tricky to say he's underutilized. I think is unfair to him just because we're not using him as a traditional running back in every play. How I'd like to see him used next season. I don't know if you guys remember Matt Forte for the Chicago Bears back in the day. Yeah. Absolute dog. Screen pass every other play. I think Jay Cutler was throwing a screen pass to Matt Forte. And I think that's sort of the guy Gibbs can be. He's explosive. He can hit his seams. If we can get him into open space, it frees everything else up. And I think he did a great job coming in to fill in when Montgomery went down with an injury for a couple weeks there in the middle of the season. And I think he picked up the role nicely. But definitely some more we can expect out of him next season, I think, and not just in the run game.
Yeah, I would like to see him utilized a little bit more like CMC is, where, maybe because CMC can also run up the gut too, but, a little bit less of that and a little bit more of, hey, we're going to put him in motion. He's going to be, he's going into the slot, but it's going to be a short route, maybe some wide receiver screens basically for him, as well as some, screens behind the line of scrimmage too, things like that. Because to your point, he is incredibly explosive, and he's such a Swiss Army knife. Woo! I would like to see him catch the ball more. Honestly, I'm with you on him not being a 3-down back. He's not an every snap type of running back, but I would like to see him incorporated more in the pass game. I think that
Absolutely.
Really opens up things. Speaking of the pass game, another individual we want to ask you about, Jameson Williams. So relatively injury prone individual, at least in his pro career. Do you think that he becomes a stable number 2 if healthy? I mean, what is kind of your outlook with him?
I think he has all the tools to become a number 2 if healthy. And I think it comes down to how much Ben Johnson, our offensive coordinator, trusts him to fill that role, right? So when you looked at him at the start of the season, limited snaps, sort of similar to Gibbs. When he is on the field, number 9s, go routes, flies. We've seen his speed. He's unbelievable. Takes the top off of any defense. And I mean, I was in the building for his first career touchdown against the Vikings, and it's nothing fancy. This is a guy where you're running a play action. Goff is taking a 5-stepper, and he's putting it down the field for JMO, right?
Dude, how many games do you go to in person? Sorry, you just keep saying, "Oh yeah, I was at this game, bro." I mean, good for you, but like, aren't those tickets expensive? At least now.
You know what? Back in the day, it was great because you could get like $35 USD and the gas down to Detroit, and you're in the building, right? When the Lions sucked, you could get club seats for dirt cheap, right? Now it's a little bit more tricky. We were lucky to get down to I think 3 or 4 games this year, and then the watch party for the Niners game when everyone was in the building. So lucky to get in for a couple this year. Always.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just like, dang, how many games do you get to go to?
It throws people off, especially when you tell them it's about a 4-hour drive down from Toronto. But it's always
really.
It's good to see. It's about that with traffic. Yeah, 3.5 most of the time. Plus, getting across the tunnel is always a pain in the ass. So
I'm sure.
But whatever. Yeah, it's good. It's good to see live. But yeah, I think he's very good at what he does. I think later in the season, we saw him running some of those end-around plays. We saw him score in the conference championship on a crazy 50-yard end-around play with a run. We've seen him run screen plays where he's taking them to the house off of that. We're starting to see him develop crossing routes into his game, stick routes. He's starting to run the whole route tree, and he's getting more comfortable with that. We saw the biggest thing with him was actually just drops, straight up drops where, everything's good until the final second and he turns away or it misses him or hits him in the hands wrong. But if he can develop that and stay training and earn the trust of the offensive coordinator, I think he has all the tools to become a number 2 in our team.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go to a different pass catcher. So, do you think Laporta could become the best tight end in the league?
It's tough. It's obviously hard to say with guys like I like the nodding that's going on to say yes. It's always tough with guys like Kelsey and Kittle in the league. But I think after Laporta's rookie showing, I think he has the tools. Like I said, same thing with JMO for him to develop and become that guy, the next guy. And what's really interesting about Laporta is his forte is blocking. We see him in a lot of tight end sets with double tight ends. You know the Lions are a run heavy team. We love to load up the line and go for it at people. He's intensely physical for his size. He's a big boy, but to see him line up next to guys like Brock Wright or Penei Sewell on that line and get in there and get physical, those are some things you don't always see with guys like Kelsey, who are more chipping and slipping into their routes, right? So I think when you combine everything that the tight end position does, he has the ability to. He's got great catch radius. We've seen him convert some clutch 3rd and 4th downs for the Lions last year. What I'd like to see more from him is some of those maybe seam routes or more downfield routes. He's a great possession receiver. So a lot of times Goff will find him at the sticks or on a quick breaking out or a curl to pick up those yards. All I know is he's light years ahead of Hawkinson was. And anytime I get the chance to slander the Vikings and Hawkinson, I'm going to do it. So the fact that he's 10 times what Hawkinson was for us is great to see. And I think he has the tools to become one of the best names in the tight end game.
I had Laporta in 2 of my 3 fantasy leagues. Yes, he absolutely can be the best tight end in the NFL. That's all I'll say about it.
He was breaking reception yards, I think, in his rookie season for both receptions and I think yards for tight ends in a rookie season. And guys like he was breaking Kellen Winslow records and Antonio Gates records for first downs in a season and receptions in a season. So I don't think it was a stroke of good luck. And the other thing is his toughness. He picked up that bone bruise and a hyperextended knee in the playoffs and came back and played against the Niners, which it's things like that are going to allow you to play 16 games a season. That's going to allow you to be the best in the league.
Agreed.
So I kind of previewed this one a little bit earlier when we talked about Dan Campbell, but we got to talk a little bit about Goff, right? So do you think that Goff can go over the edge? Do you think that he can bring Detroit a Super Bowl?
If you asked me at the start of the season, I would be a lot more skeptical. And obviously, I was probably the biggest skeptic when I heard news of the trade of Goff and Stafford. You go from pretty boy Stafford in the pocket, gunslinger, can make every throw in the book, every angle throw, to a guy like Jared Goff, you think system quarterback, you think check down, you think relies on the run game. And don't get me wrong, we rely a lot on that run game to keep him clean. But after seeing his performance in the playoffs, to win at home against a Rams team that's hungry and proven, to see a win against a Bucs team that had just taken out the Eagles as one of the best teams in the NFC, to play mistake-free football in those later games in the season and get us into a position to beat the Vikings on the road to win the NFC North. He's a quarterback that rarely makes mistakes. And when he does, it's usually things out of his control, be it interceptions from tip passes, not clean in the pocket, bad decisions. He definitely still has those mistakes. And I think his biggest thing was, people always joke that he's sort of a statue in the pocket and can't move. That's becoming less and less of an issue now that our O-line has been playing so dominant, right? If you give Goff a clean pocket, you get him in a dome, you get him where he needs to be, you get him the good plays from Ben Johnson, I don't think there's anything stopping him from getting us to a Super Bowl and winning that thing. I mean, we were 30 minutes outside of it last season, and if everything doesn't go wrong in that last half against the Niners, I see us putting up a fight in the Super Bowl. And I don't know if that's fan bias. You guys can tell me, but I mean, he did everything that he needed to do to get us there.
So, I mean, you brought it up, so I gotta ask. We have to point out the elephant in the room. What happened in that championship game? Why was that collapse so extreme? Because I was cheering my ass off for y'all. I hate the 49ers, and I was just very disappointed in the end result. So what happened?
Yeah, brother. I mean, I was 5 or 6 of those Miller Lights at Ford Field deep, sitting in my seats enjoying. I was cruising. I was leaning back, talking to strangers, saying, "This is it, guys. Like, take it, soak it in. Like, we're going to the game." And then, as I want to call it, it was an amalgamation of everything that could go wrong went wrong in that second half. So we have probably the worst play I've seen in my entire life of Kendall Vildor, which I can't believe I'm saying his name. I don't think he deserves any credit. Having a perfect Brock Purdy interception falling into his lap, only for the ball to bounce off his face mask into Ayuk's hands. Touchdown Niners. Okay, it's fine. Let it go. Next drive, first play, Gibbs fumble. Ball back to the Niners inside the 20. Easy score, McCaffrey. Okay, we're still up a score. Drive down on the next drive, go for it on fourth, miss it. Ball back to the Niners. Like, it was just a total collapse of everything that could have gone wrong, where it just did go wrong. And I think it was experience and playing the occasion and not the game, where they just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, it was right after the Gibbs fumble that I kind of went, oh shit, this isn't good. Because then they immediately went down, scored, and it was a one possession game, and I was just like, yep.
And it erases all the good you do in the first half, right? Like, you play a perfect 30 minutes of football, every right decision, perfect drives, great defensive stops, and then 1 or 2 mistakes. And what took us 30 minutes to build the lead, the Niners are now back level in 5 minutes, right? So you can't pin it on one specific thing. It was just tough to see. And I think that's something that comes with experience. So hopefully if we ever find ourselves back in that position, we know how to get out of that.
Well, experience. And then also I do think that part of the issue is defense. If we're just looking back at y'all's season as a whole, I mean, 19th in yards per game, allowed even worse in the playoffs. Y'all allowed 415 yards in the games that y'all played in the playoffs. 20th in rushing yards allowed, 18th in rushing touchdowns allowed, 29th in passing yards allowed, 26th in passing touchdowns allowed. I mean, the defense just wasn't good. And I think that a big part of the collapse from that championship game was, again, just your offense had put up enough points that as long as the defense is able to keep their shit together, you end up pulling that out, even with the, some of the mistakes and accidents and things that happen. So what are y'all going to do to fix the defense? Because that's really the missing piece. Y'all's offense is kick ass. It is incredible top to bottom. What are y'all going to do to fix the defense? Because historically you don't win Super Bowls you at least have to have an average defense at best, but normally you have to have at least a top 10 defense to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the number one thing is we got to start getting to the quarterback. I mean, multiple times this season, I've watched games where the quarterback stood in the pocket, spun the laces, patted the ball, and just carved us apart, right? So our run defense, like you said, it was middle of the road, probably not great, but I know there were some games we held, a lot of running backs to under 100 yards, and that's what you need to do. So, but the number one thing is we can't have quarterbacks like Brock Purdy sit in the pocket all day, find open receivers. Then your defense can only cover down the field for so long, right? So we have guys on the line that can do that. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson and a few other big names. I mean, we had Okwara, who's now gone, but the biggest thing is going to be one of our signings, DJ Reader, that we signed to start taking on those double teams and start allowing us to get to the quarterback. And I think once we do that, not only does that force teams to run, it's going to force quarterbacks into bad decisions. You're going to see the passing yards numbers go down. You're going to see yards per game go down. And then if you can make an offense one-dimensional, you always give yourself a shot. So we just can't have teams sit back and pick us apart.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Reader, and we'll definitely get to him here in a second because I think that was a great signing. This is actually a Tanner question, so I apologize beforehand. But we're talking about defensive players and whatnot. Is Okuda, does he rank as the worst, possibly the worst draft bust from y'all in recent memory?
In recent memory, yes, I would say so. And I think he's less so of a bust based on performance than it was that unlucky injury bug that you can't really predict. In that time frame where we pick him, we needed a corner. It's exactly the pick you need, right? It's always tough to gamble on a new corner. Usually they take a year or two to develop into the bigs, but in that time frame, we needed a corner. He was the best on the board. You take him. Tears his ACL. Obviously, we all know the story. Complete bust for the Lions. Goes on to play for Atlanta, I believe. He's doing all right now, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he got injured again. One of the worst that I've seen for sure, obviously, 2014, Eric Ebron. If you guys remember, big Eric Ebron had a great season with the Colts after we cut him. But some of the names we took before him, Odell Beckham was on the board, Aaron Donald's on the board, Zach Martin's on the board, Brandon Cooks is on the board, right? So you take a tight end. He was supposed to be that Kyle Pitts tight end, that big receiver tight end, almost like what Laporta is for us now. And I think he had something like 250 yards his season with us, and then to the win, right? So he sucked, and then. I don't know if you guys remember way back in the day, a guy by the name of Charles Rogers was supposed to be the next big wide receiver out of Michigan State.
Yeah.
Broke his collarbone his rookie season. I think he played 3 games for us that season. Ended up violating the NFL's substance abuse policy 3 times for smoking weed.
I was about to say he couldn't put down the weed.
Couldn't put down the weed, man. He had that Josh Gordon bug in him. So got cut in 2006, and then I hate to speak ill of the dead, but passed away in 2019, I think, from liver failure. So definitely one of the worst picks, considering he was supposed to be the guy. And I think we picked him ahead of Andre Johnson, who went on to be one of the best wide receivers for the Texans. So we've had a few bad ones for sure. Okuda's definitely up there.
I do like the Eric Ebron shout out because Eric Ebron played briefly for the Steelers, and he might be one of the worst football players I've ever watched. Like
he's ass, dude. He sucks.
Yeah, no, absolute football terrorist. Like can't block, can't catch, can't do anything. Like it was
football terrorist.
I mean, I think he was there for 2 years too. Like we kept him there. Like it was some of the worst football I ever watched.
And he had the frame to do it all. I mean, he's a big dude, and like on the line, he looks menacing. When you flex him out into a spread formation, it looks like he can go out and get the ball, but just hands like feet, man. Like couldn't catch a damn thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his height and weight right now at a combine. He's 6'5", 260. I mean, like
on paper, you do not want a 6'5" tight end that can catch the ball. Tough.
Oh, you got to catch the ball, right?
That's right. That's right.
So I'll segue us back to when we were talking about DJ Reader, right? So he was a pretty good pickup, probably the biggest free agency signing you guys had. What aspect of his game do you think improves your defense the most?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is run stuffing, right? Like he's known to be a big guy that can plug the gaps. But he's also been pretty good at actually getting to the quarterback as well himself. We saw him got a few sacks on Stafford. I remember watching in the Super Bowl, actually, when the Bengals were playing, got to Stafford a couple of times. The biggest thing that he does for us is he frees up the other guys on our line. So when teams are able to double team Hutchinson and double team Aleem McNeil every play, we're not getting to the quarterback, okay? Because they can just single up our bad guys on the D-line, and we're not going to get any pressure. You stick DJ Reader in there, he commands a double team almost every play he's in there. He's that big and he's that intimidating. You need 2 or 3 guys chipping him to stop him from getting in the backfield. What that does is that leaves Aleem McNeil singled up, that leaves Aiden Hutchinson singled up. If those guys stay at their level and start winning blocks and getting in the backfield, that pressure I was talking about earlier that we need gets there. So we less so sign him for his ability and more so for his ability to free up other guys on our line.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I would challenge you to, look more into his effect that he does have on the pass game, because to your point exactly, he has a gravitational pull to himself that, I mean, he's just such a massive human being, and he comes through with bad intentions, and he's one of those guys that, if you're the running back and you're the last line of defense, I mean, you're going to try and chip block him, but then it frees up another guy to be able to get to the quarterback. And so there's quite a few sacks that he didn't get last year that teammates got, but it's because, he was taking on two linemen and just left a wide open hole for, one of the, linebackers or somebody to be able to run through real fast and lay a hit on the quarterback. So I wouldn't underestimate his ability to affect the passing game, even if it's not something that you can prove through just counting stats.
Exactly.
Definitely an animal. And I think probably y'all's best signing. Do you wish that Detroit would have done a little bit more in free agency, or do you think that they did enough? Or
I don't. And the only reason is because we have to re-sign a lot of guys. So DJ Reader was a big pickup for us. The guard from Baltimore was a big pickup for us after we lost Jonah Jackson to the Rams. Those were two things we needed to fill. And of course, O-line, D-line, obviously you always have to fill those and make sure you have rotation there. A lot of people online, people I communicate with, complaining that we didn't go for the splash signing. T. Higgins was one that people wanted. People wanted Max Crosby and a blockbuster deal with the Raiders. Those are all great, and those are all guys you want on your team. But when you have to re-sign Goff, you have to re-sign Amon-Ra, you have to sign Sewell back to a contract, you have to sign Hutch back to a contract. That's money that's accounted for that we can't be going to throw away in free agency. So if it's something where we paid our home guys first, okay, then with the money you have left over in cap space, you can go out and you can sign a big name player. But I think we got just enough that's going to improve us, that's not going to put us over the edge so that we have to let one of our home guys walk. And if our team is marginally worse for it, but we get to keep Amon-Ra and we get to keep Hutch and Sewell, I'm game for that. So
fair enough. Sorry.
So the next one we got here is looking ahead at the draft. I mean, are we a week and a half out, 2 weeks out from the draft? We're coming up on it.
Yeah, it's on the 25th.
Yeah. So we're getting right there. So, what do you want to see the Lions do in the draft? Like, what do you think will be most beneficial for overall team improvement?
Yeah, I think we're at a position similar to where we were last year, where we're in a good spot where most positional needs are filled and we can kind of go out and get a weapon of our choosing with a good pick. So we're picking later in the round, obviously this year. I've heard some talk about the wide receiver from Texas, Mitchell. Guys familiar with the tall wide receiver out of Texas, Adonai Mitchell? Adonai Mitchell. I've heard talk about that. Obviously, Josh Reynolds left us about a week ago to sign with someone else. So we are kind of missing that receiver position. Obviously, Amon-Ra, and I think we have Donovan People-Jones filling in, but he's obviously not, a big enough name to fill in as a starter. So a lot of talk about getting a wide receiver. Obviously, defense needs a buffer. Linebackers, safeties, corners, you can never go wrong. Kool-Aid McKinstry has been one of the biggest names out of Alabama at safety. He's one of those guys that's like you said, Swiss Army knife, can line up at corner, can line up at safety, can line up in the dime at a nickel spot. Guys like that. I think we really need to beef up our defense. It's fun. It's fun to get a tall wide receiver and, have splash plays and it looks good on film. But if you want a team that's going to compete, you have to have that solid defense. So I think in the draft, we're going to look to stack defense first and then see if we can pick up maybe someone else on the offense later on in the rounds.
Fair enough. And it's a good draft for corners. I mean, there's like 6 first-round corners this draft class, so you're going to get somebody. So going on the flip side of that, what would you be most upset about them addressing the draft? Like, where do you feel like the Lions are most positionally secure at?
Most positionally secure, I'm going to say quarterback, not because I think they would ever draft a quarterback, because we have Goff. Obviously, we're probably going to re-sign Goff. And then last year, in a surprise pick for me last year was Hendon Hooker, who's been sitting behind Goff. That a lot of people forget about. One of the star players for Tennessee when he was back in college. Great arm, really good kid, mobile in the pocket for his size. So I don't see them going anywhere with some of the other teams looking to pick up quarterbacks. Other than that, I mean, we did some beef to our D-line with DJ Reader, and we have some guys coming back from injury, so I don't think we need anyone on that front. I really hate O-line picks, and solely because it really takes a lot to shell out for a really good O-lineman. And there's a handful that you're willing to take super high. And it's something the Lions have done in the past that's burned them a couple of times, where they don't turn out to be as great as they seem in college. So I'm always wary of the O-line picks, but I think the Lions have a solid enough O-line that they'll stay away from that this year.
Fair enough. And kind of moving towards the greater scope of next season, this is obviously barring any type of disaster or anything as far as injuries or the draft or anything else. What does success look like for y'all next season? What is, for you to say it was a successful season, what bar do y'all have to reach?
Yeah, we'll never count out a catastrophic demise with the Lions.
Exactly why I had to preface it.
Right. So barring the Lions being the same old Lions and going back to some nonsense next year, if things stay the same
16,
and trend upwards as they have been for the past couple of years, to me, first and foremost is winning the division again, getting to the top of that NFC North, and at the very least, winning the NFC North, at the best, getting out of that wild card position, getting into a position where if we have to play playoff games, we're playing them at home and we're only playing 2 of them, right? Mm-hmm. So NFC is the big picture for us. I've had people online say Super Bowl or bust. That's a great mentality to have. I don't think it's realistic and conclusive to where the team is at currently. You can say that that's wrong, seeing as we were, one half of football outside of the Super Bowl. I think a lot of things lined up for us last year to get into that position for sure. Realistically, we have to win our division. Realistically, we have to be playing meaningful games in the fall, in the springtime, and meaningful games in the postseason. So for me, it's playoffs. For me, it's getting out of that wild card round that we've been kind of lingering around these past couple of years. We should not be surprised to see the Lions win the NFC North next year. That's what success looks like to me.
Would you be disappointed if you don't make an NFC Championship appearance? Like if you lose in the divisional round to, say, one of those really good NFC teams, like the Cowboys, Eagles.
You put us in that conversation. How sweet of you, Tanner. Thanks.
As a fan, yes, I would be, because you never want to see that, obviously. And once you get to that position, you feel like your team has the ability to go all the way. Realistically speaking, once playoff starts, it's a whole different beast, right? You can have a team like the Bucs, who were how many wins did the Bucs have? 9 wins coming out of the season. Beat the Eagles in the first round. The Eagles weren't expecting that, right? So that's a failure to the Eagles, but it's a testament to what playoffs in the NFL are like. Any team can beat any team. So for us to get there is the win for me. Anything after that is up to the players. And as a fan, you can't really be upset with getting knocked out that close to the bowl. It sucks, but that's the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right. Well, I have the final question for us today, and this is just going to be looking back at Lions history. So what player in your team's past do you wish you could have watched live that you didn't get the opportunity to?
It's tough. It's really tough because there's been so many greats looking back through the years. I know that's hard to believe for the Lions, but they've had players that have been great. The teams haven't always been great, but the players have always been unbelievable. So I'm going to have to go with the obvious choice. It's the guy whose jersey I'm wearing right now, the Big 20, Barry Sanders. It's the cliche answer, but it's the right answer. You're looking at one of the best running backs of all time, no matter who you ask. You ask Emmitt Smith, you ask Walter Payton. I know he wasn't around for most of it, but you ask guys like that back in the day who the best player was, and the name comes up as Barry Sanders, right? I've heard the stories, I've seen the highlights, I've seen the videos, I have the posters in my room. You see it on NFL films.
Yeah,
he was the real deal, and being able to see him live would have been great. His last season was 99, I believe, when he walked away from the game, which was before my time, but definitely would have liked to see him, blaze his path on the field like he did. And just unbelievable what he could do on the field. And even, stuff like not celebrating in the end zone, walking away from the game, Hall of Fame speech where he's not a flashy guy, right? Scores a touchdown, throws the ball to the ref. He was the epitome to me of everything that the Lions are. And it's a classy organization. It's a hardworking organization. It's not the rah-rah that's sort of coming up now. It's everything else. So Barry Sanders would have been it for me.
Fair enough. Sick choice. Well, so we are getting to the end of our time. Real quick before we wrap things up, do you want to plug your social media, any projects you might have? I know that you're a writer for a newspaper, so maybe you can toss that in there too.
Yeah. I'll keep the newspaper stuff out of the way just because it's not too sports related and I don't want to bore anyone with my personal work. But if anyone does enjoy Lions football commentary or even commentary about the league, I also do stuff about baseball, hockey, anything Detroit related, but also league wide for MLB, NHL, NFL. You can follow me on Twitter. It's @the1prideguy. I'm sure it'll be linked somewhere. But yeah, that's really it. I don't really have anything else going on, to be honest with you. It was a pleasure to be on, guys. I really appreciate you having me. Anytime I get to nerd out about Lions football is a good day for me. But if anyone wants to see more angry tweets during the season, live tweets about me cussing out, Dan Campbell's fourth down decisions, you can find me on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know what? I might just put notifications on your tweets just for the Dan Campbell cussing.
Once the season rolls around, you're gonna need it. It gets a little crazy during the games. So
yeah, for sure. Well, cool. We appreciate you, Luke, for hanging out with us. Again, for anyone who's been listening, that is, you said the One Pride Guy, right?
I believe so. Let me pull it up really quick here because I know I might be wrong.
But yeah, make sure to get
the One Pride Guy. The One Pride Guy. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. At the One Pride Guy. Make sure to give him a follow. Also, if you haven't, give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Pods. We know majority of our listeners are normally Apple Pod people. So we are always curious if you do listen to the second segment of the show. We know a lot of y'all listen to the first segment. I am curious if y'all listen to the second segment. So if y'all do right now, give us 5 stars and say "Go Lions" in the review, just so we know that it's you and that you're real. So thanks again, everyone. This has been FANBASE Fiasco, part of the Fourth Down Fiasco podcast network. And until next time, my friends.
Well, I like school, and I like football, and I'm gonna keep doing them both because they make me feel good.